What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another video here on the Big Blue in the Bronx YouTube channel. Hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops review drops. Appreciate it all coming back. Share this out. Do all the good stuff. If you haven't already, check out some of our other content, our live streams, and also the live stream we did with John Schmelk talking about the Giants draft class. It was a fun time to go over the draft class with John Schmelk, and I'm pretty sure we'll be doing something later in the week. This coming week, with the schedule coming up for the New York Giants, we'll get to see where they play on certain occasions. Will they go overseas? All these other different things. But I want to talk about a topic that has been widely discussed on the Twitter sphere and also a little bit on YouTube regarding the New York Giants' second wide receiver, I guess you could say as of right now, with Malik Neighbors coming in, Darius Slayton. Now, Darius Slayton is facing another year with the New York Giants, and then he's got free agency ahead of him. And he didn't come to voluntary workouts. Now, they are voluntary, but he didn't come to voluntary workouts due to the fact that he wants an extension. Now, whether it's years, I don't know. Whether it's money, probably is, for the production he's put on the field. What's interesting to me is I actually put out a video in the 2022 season talking about why the Giants should extend Darius Slayton. We'll see if I have the same feeling, but it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of variables that are in play with Darius Slayton. You know, maybe a few years ago with a crappier wide receiver core, the decision was a lot easier. Now, with Daniel Jones not necessarily being the quarterback of the future and all these other different things, you may be like, you know, is it worth it to pay a wide receiver too? But again, let's step right into it. So stats, production-wise, going back all these years, been with the Giants for 5 years, signed a 2-year extension after the 22 season for 23 and 24, but specifically for Slayton last season. 4 touchdowns, which is the most since 2019, and I remember, obviously, that long touchdown from Tyrod Taylor against the Eagles, and, of course, against the Rams. So that's another moment to mark down for him. But 770 yards, which is the most he's ever had in a single season in his career. 50 receptions, which is tied for the second most in his, well, actually tied for the most. Think about it. 2020, he had 50 receptions as well. 15.4 yards per reception, which is tied with his rookie year numbers. And a catch percentage of 63.3, which is the second highest in his career. Also, something we should talk about is the preconceived notion about his drop problems, right? You know, it seems like sometimes he does drop passes in big situations, whatever the case may be. One against Washington a few years ago, and also against the Vikings in the playoffs on, I think it was like a 3rd down and 9. But nonetheless, he did have a total, take a look at those drop numbers for you guys, 3 drops last year. But I'll give you this, right? You know, there was so many different quarterbacks for the Giants. There was Jones, there was DeVito, and there was Tyrod Taylor. But he had the highest passer rating in terms of targeted, right? You know, quarterbacks tended to go to him a lot. Again, the high in yards and all that other good stuff. He had 2 interceptions last year. Not interceptions as Slayton getting an interception. When he's targeted, though, 2 interceptions, which is not necessarily a surprise. But again, it's not necessarily a knock on Slayton because you have to look at those interceptions very, very closely. You know, those could be tip passes, all these other different things. But 3 drops last year, 5 broken tackles, and that's pretty much that, right? 101.8 passer rating as far as that goes. So let's talk about something before we get to the questions and, you know, is he worth the wide receiver 2 money and how much you're going to pay him and all these other different things. I think one of the biggest X factors this coming season, which is a long ways away, is Jalen Hyatt. The Giants regime invested a 3rd-round pick in Jalen Hyatt. He didn't have the best numbers last year because of the quarterback situation and all these other different things that are going into it. The offense was just straight terrible. And the Giants are banking on another good year, or at least a jump from Jalen Hyatt in his second year, eliminating some of the drop problems and all these other different things. But I think the emergence of Jalen Hyatt, quote-unquote emergence, how big that emergence is really going to determine what the New York Giants do with Darius Slayton. Now, they could do something before the season and say, hey, listen, we're going to extend you before the season, and then pretty much that, I would say, kind of puts Slayton in wide receiver 2 and Hyatt a little bit back further and gives them time to develop him. And maybe if he doesn't develop, we could talk about that down the line. But I think Jalen Hyatt is going to be one of the biggest variables in this whole Darius Slayton contract situation. Now, let's go to questions, right? Is he worth wide receiver 2 money? And I looked at a couple wide receiver 2 contracts, not necessarily in terms of the length, but the years. And I found a couple of guys who are similar, or at least in the same spot as like a wide receiver 2. Not a wide receiver 1 because Slayton isn't a wide receiver 1, but a wide receiver 2. Brandon Cooks, 657 yards last year, 8 touchdowns, 54 receptions for Dallas. Brandon Cooks is currently under contract with them, I think, for another year or 2, but nonetheless, let's see. Where is Brandon Cooks? He is currently earning about $10 million a year, which honestly isn't terrible considering the type of receiver he is. Mike Williams, who, I'm not going to factor in last year because he was injured, but the year before that, he put 895 yards up, 4 touchdowns, 63 receptions. So similar production, not necessarily on the brink of 1,000, but closer to Slayton's numbers. He is making a total about $10 million a year with the Jets. Now you go over to a guy, let's say Darnell Mooney. Now, again, you kind of have to factor in, this is a guy who 2021 he had over 1,000 yards, but the last 2 seasons haven't been great from him, whether it's injury, this, that, and the third. Also, DJ Moore was a big impact last year, and that was pretty much Justin Fields' favorite target. 414 yards, 1 touchdown, and 31 catches. So if you want to consider that an overpay, go ahead and do it. Gabriel Davis, right? Obviously came from Buffalo, is now getting paid by Jacksonville. 746 yards, 7 touchdowns, 16.6 yards per reception, 45 catches. He is currently earning about $13 million per year. And I think 1 or 2 more, I think pretty much 1 more we'll go over, is a guy in Tyler Lockett who is currently taking in $15 million a year to be the wide receiver 2 next to DK Metcalf or the slot wide receiver, however you determine it. Last year, 894 yards, 5 touchdowns, 11.3 yards per reception, 79 catches, 122 targets in 17 games. And he's also an older player at 31 years old. So, realistically, right, if you're middle on this, if you don't really have a preference, you could say that Darius Slayton is worth wide receiver 2 money because though all of those different guys are in different situations, Brandon Cooks and Darnell Mooney and Gabriel Davis and Mike Williams, all those different guys have different quarterback situations. And you know what? The league really doesn't care about that when they're paying you. They'll just give you the money that they think you're worth based on your production. Maybe they'll look into the context. But nonetheless, I think with all of the quarterback nonsense that has gone on, I think Slayton's done a solid job being the Giants' basically wide receiver 1. But again, he's not really positioned for that role. And we figured that out a couple of years ago. Probably in 2020 when they tried making him the wide receiver 1. He really wasn't fit for the role, dropped problems, this, that, and the other thing. And then they totally backed off of him in 2021. So, as far as that goes, I think he's worth wide receiver 2 money. Now, whether the Giants want to pay him that is going to be a totally different operation. And my other question, before we get to the final verdict, is could the Giants trade him if Jalen Hyatt succeeds? Again, going back to the Jalen Hyatt thing, he's going to be a big variable in this Slayton contract situation. If they go into the season and Slayton plays, but there's no contract done, and Hyatt tends to be getting more production and Daniel Jones is throwing him the ball a little bit more, or maybe Drew Lock comes in and Hyatt starts to ascend, that could be a sign for Slayton as, okay, well, listen, it was great while we had you, but let's get something for you in the meantime. So they could trade him at the deadline to a contender, and that contender has the rest of the year with him and then free agency. So the Giants aren't really losing anything. But also what could happen is if the Giants, again, maybe the similar situation, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Slayton is getting wide receiver 2 numbers, and they want Hyatt to be more involved in the offense, or they think in practice he's doing the right things, this, that, and the third, they could still trade him because the value is going to be higher at that point, and he'll go to a contender. And again, the same thing. I don't think the Giants will contend in 2024. I think they should based on the moves they've made, but that's a totally different subject. But nonetheless, I think it is definitely a possibility if Jalen Hyatt gets enough praise from the coaching staff, if he succeeds, that Darius Slayton could be gone at the deadline. Now, is he worth an extension from the New York Football Giants? As tough of a decision it is, I'm going to say no. By all means, he has put up wide receiver 2 numbers. And that's a good thing, right? With all the quarterback situation, the offense being terrible, he's had his drop problems, but he's worth wide receiver 2 money. You look at guys like Mooney and Cooks and all these other cats. But here's the thing you got to look at. Wan'Dale Robinson, you invested a second-round pick in him to be your slot wide receiver. You invested a third-round pick in Jalen Hyatt. And for the third straight draft, you get another wide receiver, and that's Malik Nabers as your number 1. Nonetheless, you also get another offensive weapon in Theo Johnson from Penn State. So, as far as that goes, you got to think about this logically. We'll see if there's a lock to Slayton connection in training camp if they ever make it happen. We know that Slayton is more Jones's receiver. With all of that invested in the future of the franchise, right? The Theo Johnsons of the world, the Malik Nabers of the world, Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt. All those guys, all those offensive weapons. Again, with asset management, is it really smart to pay him $12 million if, again, you used a third-round pick on Hyatt, a second-round pick on Robinson, a first-round pick on Malik Nabers, plus the fact that you may have to kick over some money in regards to possibly paying a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, or just paying your draft class in general for the future, or using it to go get a quarterback, or using it to go get, a defensive lineman, something along those lines. So it's a tough decision. Again, I'm going to say no for the moment because the Giants have just a lot of assets in the wide receiver room, and having Jalen Hyatt, again, third-round pick as a wide receiver 4, I mean, it could happen, but I just don't see it. I think they imagined bigger things when they drafted him in 2023. But like, comment, subscribe to all the good stuff. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or drops. Appreciate you all coming back. Again, check out some of our live streams, including the one with John Schmelk. We're trying to get our way to 2,000 subscribers. I know it's been a little slow, but share out, do all the good stuff. We appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon.